There we go. Yes, the meeting ID, sweetheart, is...
There's 4 people on.
Admit everybody. All right. So yes, the meeting ID is 737-142-1938.
737. Next.
142.
142.
1938.
1938.
All right. Admit everybody. Admit everybody. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Happy to see everybody here on this Ramadan day. Jazakallah khair for joining us. Very nice. Yeah, I let you in. So yesterday we went over... Let me mute everybody. I have a few different phones here going on. All right, actually devices or whatever you call it. So yesterday we went over Surah Yunus. And today, inshallah, we're going to be going over 2 surahs. We have Surah Hud, which is Surah number 11. Kahoot questions, Surah number 11. And after that, we're going to go over the very nice story of Surah Yusuf, which is the name of the surah. It's also the story of Yusuf. So inshallah, we're going to try to get all that in, inshallah, and a quick little game at the end. By the way, those of you that missed the challenge announcement yesterday, I extended it by 1 more day. The challenge is to try to pray 2 rakats of nafil that you have not prayed before. So maybe that could be Salatul Duha, that could be adding 2 rakats sometime at night after Isha or even early in the morning. Any of those are okay. But the challenge question for those of you that are doing the Girl Scout challenge on the app, it is to pray 2 rakats of nafil that you have not prayed before. Okay. So in Surah Hud, this is a late Meccan surah. In verse number 6, Allah says, "There isn't a creature that moves on the earth without its needing Allah for its food and supplies. He knows where its usual resting place is, even as He knows where it lurks for a while, for everything is recorded in a distinctive ledger." This is telling us about the knowledge, the vast and deep and all-comprehensive knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says He's the one who created the heavens and the earth in 6 time periods. We talked about this yesterday. So He created the heavens and the earth in 6 time periods, and His throne was over the water. He created you so that He could test you in order to bring out which of you is most noble in conduct. So this is a beautiful, very complete verse where Allah tells us that He created the heavens and the earth in 6 time periods. So He's telling us about creation, and He's telling us the purpose of creation. So He gives us this metaphorical example of the throne, that He is there in the throne. So He's above us, in heaven, in a throne. And He tells us why He created us. He tells us that He created us in order to test us, which of you is most noble in conduct. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the word morality and how we are supposed to make the most moral decisions that we can, not necessarily the most logical or not those that satisfy our emotional desires, but those that are most moral. So that is the meaning of which of you is most noble in conduct. It's the person who makes the most morally correct decisions. Okay? And so here, once again in verse 11, it says, in verse 10, He tells us about what happens to those who make the immoral decisions, but it says in verse 11, although that's not the case for those who persevere and do what's morally right, for they're going to be forgiven and have a great reward. So if you do the morally right choice, if you take the right moral decisions, 2 things will happen. You're going to be forgiven and have a great reward, because we as human beings will always have some sins. We're not perfect, but if you try to keep doing the right thing, you'll be forgiven and have a great reward. Also in verses 15 and 16, it says, those who desire the life of this world and all its glitter will be repaid by us for the deeds they did within it, and they will not be shortchanged. So if you desire this world, what does that mean? That means television show is on. If the time for prayer is going away, this world is the television show. Time for prayer is going away. Are you going to choose to just miss prayer and keep watching the show? Or another example, mashallah, all of you are fasting. I know none of you would break your fast, but one desire of your world, of this world, might be your hunger. If you say, oh, forget about it, I'm just going to go sneak and have some food, that would be the desire of this world, right? And so here, Allah is saying, if you desire the life of this world so much that you break your covenant with Allah, right, then you're going to be very much punished for that. You will not be shortchanged. It says they're the ones who will have nothing in the next life other than the fire. All the plans they made will be useless there, even as all that they did will come to nothing. Okay, so that is the consequence if we desire the life of this world to the point where we disobey Allah. Then in verse 23 and 24, Allah says, those who believed, who did what was morally right, who humbled themselves before their Lord, they'll be the companions of the garden and they get to stay. So first, if we believe, okay, you have to believe. If you're not a believer, then you don't even get the first requirement. But you have to believe in Allah and everything that He asks us to believe in. And who did what was morally right. So your actions have to be morally right. And what else? Who humbled themselves. So we know belief comes from the inside, right? Actions are part of our body and our hands and our limbs and what we do. And it says who humble themselves. So humbleness is the opposite of arrogance. We talked about arrogance before, and that's a quality that the shaitan had. It's a quality sometimes the Bani Israel people had. We heard about their stories so many times. Humbleness is something on the inside of your heart. It's part of your attitude. The opposite would be arrogance. But what we want to be is humble on front of Allah, right? On front of Allah. We're always on front of Allah, right? Allah can always see us. So that means that when it comes to decisions that Allah is asking us to make, that we're humble. It says they'll be the companions of the garden and they'll get to stay. Garden meaning Jannah. That same Jannah that we said that each person's Jannah will be as big as the heavens and the earth. And it says there they will get to stay. It says the two classes of people, both faithless and believer. So Allah is making an analogy to help us understand. Faithless means the disbelievers or the people who insist on disobeying Allah versus the believers. He's comparing the two. It says can be compared to the blind and deaf and the seeing and hearing, okay? So those who are faithless or disobedient, they are like the blind and the deaf. And those who are believing are the seeing and the hearing. So they might be two human beings in front of us, but one of them is like a blind and deaf person. How? Spiritually, right? They might look like they can see and they can hear, but spiritually they're dead because they're disbelieving. But the person who is believing, they can see and they can hear the message that Allah is giving to them, okay? Next, Allah brings up several stories of the Prophet in this surah, one after one after one. The first story is that of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. And, basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them all the same mission to tell their people to believe in Him, worship Him, leave all the bad, immoral acts, and to obey, Allah in those things that He asked them to do. Ultimately, Nuh's people were becoming, they didn't accept him. Majority of them didn't accept him. So in verse 37, Allah commands him, build a boat, an ark, okay? So build a boat under our sight and by our direction, and don't ask me any further about those who do wrong, for they're going to be drowned. So, we all know, the story of the Noah and the ark. Well, here's the story, that Allah asks him to build a boat. So, he's building the boat, and in verses 38, 39, we learn that people ridicule him, they make fun of him, right? And then the command comes from Allah in verse 40, where He says, or in verse 39, then our command arrived and the heated banks of the rivers began to overflow. So a flood started happening in the world. Allah commanded it, and a flood came, which covered the world. And it says, board the ship, we said, and take a pair of male and female from every kind of useful livestock. So Allah commanded Nuh alayhi salam to get on this ark, on this big boat, and take a man and a woman of every kind of animal on there so that they could survive, right? Because everything else would drown. It says, load up your family, all except for those against whom the sentence has already been given, and load the believers. However, only a few had ever believed with him. So one thing to learn from Prophet Nuh alayhi salam is the patience that he had. He kept on conveying the message of Islam. He was patient. People ridiculed him, and his life was so long, 950 years. He was He had to have a lot more patience than all of us. And so only a few people believed, and those are the ones who were allowed to get on the boat. Okay, so then basically, he went, on the boat, and, even Noah called out to his son who had become separated from the rest of the faithless, "My son, come on board with us and don't share the same fate as the faithless," right? And so moving on, yeah, it says, "Oh, my Lord, my son was out of my family. Still, your promise is true, and you are the fairest of all." Allah replied, "Noah, he was no longer part of your family, for his actions were other than moral." So he was doing immoral actions. So don't ask me about the things you may know nothing about. This is a word of caution that I'm giving you, so you will not be one of the ignorant. So the message to take from that is that even within our own families, not everybody is necessarily going to obey Allah. Sometimes people are tested with having family members who are going to disobey Allah. And yet we are still required to obey Allah. We cannot say, our parents, our siblings, our son, our daughter, they're not obeying Allah. I guess we just need to blend in with them for the sake of family. No, that is also one of our struggles, is to try to be the best we can be, even if the people who are closest to us are not obeying Allah, okay? So the next, here, all the bad people are drowned in the flood and so on and so forth. And then the next story, Hud, the next prophet that's mentioned is the prophet Hud, okay? And it's a similar thing. He asked his people to worship Allah. If we go to verse 59, it says, "And so that was the people of Ad. They renounced the signs of their Lord, disobeyed his messengers, and obeyed the commands of every arrogant enemy of faith." Verse 60, "They were pursued by a curse in this life, and on the day of assembly, oh, how they will be punished, for Ad rejected their Lord. And so away with the Ad, the people of Hud." Okay, so they were also destroyed. Another people are the people of Thamud. Okay, so the prophet Saleh's story comes after this. And a Kahoot question is, the miracle of the prophet Saleh was that Allah sent a very big giant camel. Okay, a camel. That was like a kind of a miracle, a sign from Allah that was sent. But what happened? Allah gave a command. And if you can think back to some of the first stories we talked about, Adam and Eve, and how Allah gave them a command, do not eat from this tree. What was the purpose of that? To see if people, if they obeyed Allah. Here Allah is giving another command. Here's an example where he was testing them, and he said, "My people, this camel is especially blessed by Allah, and it's a sign for you. Therefore, leave her to graze on Allah's land, and do her no harm, or swift punishment will befall you." Here's just a simple command, which is, do not do anything to harm this camel. It's a sign from Allah. But then what happened? And that was verse 64 and 65. It says, "The arrogant people among them cut her legs and crippled her. So Saleh told them, 'Enjoy yourselves for the next 3 days in your home, after which you're going to be destroyed.' And that's a promise that won't be proven false." So they disobeyed that command from Allah. They disobeyed what the messenger was telling them. And what happened? They were completely destroyed. The next story that comes up is the ruin of the people of Lut alayhi salam, okay? So long story short, Lut alayhi salam, his people did not also obey. In fact, they had the sin that we talked about, okay? And so they, it says that we want nothing from your daughters, and you know quite well what we want to do with your guests. So basically they were committing this crime of committing indecency with the same gender. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also destroyed them. The next prophet and people that's mentioned are the people of Madian, which is Shu'aib alayhi salam. Okay, and we've heard these stories a couple of times in past surahs. So we sent to the people of Madian his brother Shu'aib. Okay, and what was their issue? What was their test? Or what was their corruption? Why were they destroyed? So if we look in verse 85, it says, "My people, weigh and measure fairly. Do not withhold from people what rightfully belongs to them. Don't spread corruption in the land with the desire to cause chaos." They used to cheat people. Okay, the caravans would come through and they would cheat them. So if you say that you're selling somebody 5 pounds of sugar or flour, that's what you should give them when they pay you for it. They were putting stones in the bags and really giving them less. And this is a very big sin, and this became like a very rampant in their society. So what is the lesson for us? We have to be fair and honest. even if it hurts us, even if we're not, it seems like we're struggling, we're suffering, always we have to be honest people. Okay, we always have to be honest people. In this life, we are not here necessarily to be happy all the time, but we are here to be righteous all the time. Okay, we have an obligation to do the right thing at all times, no matter what it might seem the consequence is. Okay, and there's very few times when we're given an exception to that, right? So for example, you don't eat pork. Okay, it's never ever okay to eat pork unless maybe you're absolutely dying, and then maybe, in that situation we can see there's some exceptions, but in general, even if that means you have to be hungry, even if that means cafeteria is only selling, pork pizza. I remember when I was younger, when I was in elementary school, the pizza day was like the big thing to look forward to, because there were some years where I took lunch from home and some years I got lunch from school. Everybody was looking forward to the pizza, but the issue was that pizza had pepperoni sausage or whatever on it, right? So that year I would buy my food, and the only thing I couldn't eat what was everybody else was so happy to eat, which was the pork pizza. So, it doesn't matter, what is popular or what is tempting you, even if you have to be hungry, you cannot commit wrong. So here, back to the story, it says, Shu'aib, they answered, are the prayers that you're making to your God telling you that we should give up worshiping what our ancestors did or give up using our property? What does that basically mean? When people say things like that, it means that that's what we're used to doing. That's our culture. That's how we saw things growing up, okay? So if your cultural outfit has, your belly showing or your sleeves are this much, and that's the norm in your culture, that doesn't mean that that's okay to do that, because in our religion, we know we have to cover, right? Or, if there's something that's normal in your culture, culture is not our measurement, right? Even if everyone around us is doing something, it doesn't make it right. Okay, if everyone's going to prom, if everyone's doing something haram, it doesn't mean that that's our priority and we have to blend into that culture. No, our standards have to be what pleases Allah and stay away from what displeases Allah. Okay, moving to verse 94, it says, when our command came, we saved Shu'aib and all those who believed along with him through an act of our own mercy, but the mighty blast took hold of the corrupt, and they lay cowering in their homes by morning. So sure enough, they were disobeying and going on in their corruption, but Allah's promise came to be. And even though he saved Shu'aib, what happened is the rest of them were destroyed, okay? And it looked like they never lived and flourished there before. And so these are some of the stories in this surah. I want to move on quickly to Surah Yusuf, which is the 12th surah. And here is a very beautiful story, which has many stories within the story. So I will try to go through them, and we might go a couple of minutes over today. However, Yusuf, so here in verse 4, Yusuf said to his father, "O father, I saw in a dream that 11 stars and the sun and moon were all bowing themselves to me." So Yusuf, alayhi salam, was very, very close to his father, Yaqub, and he had several brothers. Those brothers were very jealous of him because Allah had put a love for Yusuf alayhi salam in his father's heart. And so his father said to him, "My little son, don't mention this dream to your brothers. They might plot against you out of jealousy. Shaitan is the clear enemy of all humanity." So he realized that the brothers would, feel this haram kind of jealousy. So jealousy, one lesson that is going to be extracted here is that human beings sometimes feel jealousy, like if somebody is more dear or if somebody has more or whatever, but you're not supposed to behave on that jealousy by hurting someone else. But we'll see what happens here. So the brothers plot against Yusuf alayhi salam. They all go out, and I think we all know this story. They all go out and they pretended like a wolf ate him up, okay? And they brought like a fake bloody shirt to, they brought a shirt of his back to the father and claimed that, Yusuf alayhi salam was now, destroyed because, a wolf ate him up. And what they really did is they actually threw him down a well. And I was blessed enough to actually visit the well that is said to be Yusuf alayhi salam's well. It's inside of a church right now, like in Palestine. But it's a small little well, and they threw him down the well. And so the father was very, very devastated, right? He was very devastated. And the brothers, what was their what was their motive for doing this terrible crime? It was jealousy, right? It was jealousy. And this jealousy comes from where? It comes from inside your heart. This is a disease of the heart, right? And when you are not, when you don't accept what Allah created or gave, or the way that Allah has decided things, if you lose sight of that, what can happen is you can grow jealousy in your heart, right? Because you're so attached, you're so desirous of something, in this life, that you become so ungrateful that if you transgress the bounds and go and eliminate a person, right? Some people might murder, they might steal, they might start, defaming somebody. There's so many haram things people do. They break relationships out of jealousy. Jealousy is something we have to really keep in check, because you're going to be tested with jealousy sometimes, but we cannot behave in the wrong way, which is disobedient to Allah, right? We can't hurt people that are innocent out of jealousy. So what happened there is they behaved out of jealousy. And Yusuf alayhi salam was picked up by a caravan, and he was brought to a household. The Egyptian who bought Yusuf said to his wife, "Treat him honorably, for he might bring us some benefit, or we could even adopt him as a son." So he was raised as a member of the household, okay? And it says, this is how we settled Yusuf in the land, so we could teach him how to interpret the passing of events. So, sometimes, you might think, even as an adult, I might think, why would Allah put somebody through all this? Well, Allah has a reason. He has a wisdom. Here, he gives us a little glimpse of why. It says, so we could teach him how to interpret the passing of events. So, he put Yusuf through a series of experiences in his life, and all knowledge and wisdom come from Allah, okay? So it says, in time, Yusuf became fully mature, okay? So time has passed, and here's another segment to his life. It says, we endowed him with sound judgment and intelligence, and that's how we reward those who are good. So Yusuf alayhi salam had some really exceptional qualities, okay? He had, sound judgment, superior intelligence, judgment. We know that Allah gave him like half of the beauty of the whole world, okay? And I don't know how that's even possible, only Allah knows, but he was a very, very beautiful human being, and that was a test for the people around him. It says, she in whose house he lived began to feel attracted to him, and she sought to seduce him against his moral nature, okay? She bolted the doors and said to him, I'm ready for you now, so come to me. So the great Aziz's wife kind of fell, she was kind of obsessed with Yusuf alayhi salam, and she wanted him to commit a haram act with her. And so Yusuf claimed, Allah forbid, your husband is my master. He's the one who made my life here honorable. No good comes to people who do wrong. So Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was trapped in this room and she wanted him to commit a haram, he had to have a lot of self-discipline, because there's a noble, and she was told to be a beautiful woman. And it's not that he didn't necessarily have human desires to do the wrong, but he had taqwa. He had a character strength. He had fear of Allah. And that's what distinguishes a mu'min and with someone who is not a believer, or who's not behaving as a believer, right? So as a human being, you're going to be tested with your desires and with your wishes, okay? And that can be in any situation. Here, it's a situation of wanting to do a haram act in a way with someone of the opposite gender. So you are also going to be tested with things like that. But the difference is, it's not that you're not going to want to do something wrong sometimes, but the person who has taqwa of Allah is going to pass the test by controlling their desires, okay? They're not going to disobey Allah. And that's Yusuf alayhi salam. He had taqwa, and he said he will not do that, because no good comes to people who do wrong. So he realized that if you do wrong, and if you give in to your desire, then what would happen? You're going to get all those punishments that we keep hearing about in the Quran, right? So she still tried to go after him. And what happened is she actually raced him to the door and tore his shirt from behind. And he was trying to get away, okay? So she was like trying to capture Yusuf alayhi salam. That's how crazy she was about him. And then what happened is the great Aziz, was at the door. It says her husband was standing right there when they reached the door. And so then, because she had no taqwa, she was just following her whims and desires, suddenly she just got in a situation, a bad situation, where she tried to lie and get herself out of it, to the degree where she painted the blame on Yusuf alayhi salam. She said, she just started saying whatever. She said, what other punishment can there be for someone who wickedly tried to seduce your wife except prison or a painful being? She was scared of her husband, and she said, oh my God, you know, this was Yusuf who was trying to go after me, which is a lie, right? She was trying to save herself. It says, but she's the one who tried to seduce me away from my nature, Yusuf protested. Then a member of the household who witnessed the scene as it unfolded, so somebody with a bit of logic said, hey, let's use logical evidence. Where is the shirt torn? Is it torn from the front or the back? It was torn from the back. So it wouldn't make sense that his shirt is torn from the back if he was the one who was the perpetrator, right? So that was kind of like obvious. So it says, if his shirt is torn from the back, then she's a liar and he's telling the truth, okay? So, you know, there is room for this logical evidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us. And so moving along, so basically, you know, the Aziz was like, okay, Yusuf, just forget this happened. He turned his back to his wife and he said, apologize for your offense, for you're clearly at fault. So she was found to be guilty, okay? The next part of the story is that this event became known to the people of the town, the people of the city. And, okay, yes, so, sorry about that, I was just checking something. So here, the women of the city, the noble women, found out that Aziz's wife became obsessed with Yusuf alayhi salam, and they started kind of talking about it. Like, you know, they don't have anything better to do. They started talking, and when she heard their malicious gossiping, she invited them and prepared a banquet for them. So when the wife of the Aziz heard, she said, you know what, I'm going to make a public display of this. She made a banquet. And then she invited all of her rich little friends or whoever. They came to the banquet. She gave each of them a knife, okay, a fruit cutting knife. And it says, while they were cutting their food, she called out to Yusuf saying, come out, Yusuf, and stand before them. She made Yusuf alayhi salam come out in front of these women. And this is how much God gifted him with beauty and attraction. It says, when they saw him and his handsome features astounded them, they cut right through their fruit to their hands. Imagine how much they lost it when they saw him, that when they were cutting the fruit, they cut through their hands. I mean, that was you know, a pretty big trance that they were in. And then they said, Allah save us, they cried. He's no ordinary man. This is no less than a handsome prince. Okay? And so then it goes on and on, you know, but that's kind of the highlights of that story. Also, Yusuf alayhi salam were put into prison. This is the next story. And two of the prisoners asked Yusuf alayhi salam about dreams, because he had the ability to interpret dreams in a true way. So the first one said, I saw myself in a dream pressing wine. The second one said, I saw myself in a dream carrying bread on my head with a swarm of birds eating off of it. So, you know, later it says that my fellow inmates, as for the first of you, he will again pour out the wine for his master to drink. As the second one, he'll be hung from a stake and birds will eat off his head. The matter of you two asked me has been decided. So, you know, basically this is just, you know, it's not really that significant, but the point is that he had this ability or this gift to be able to interpret dreams. Now it goes on to a mysterious dream that the king of Egypt had. This is the next little part of the story. Yeah, I think it's worth just going over, even if we go a couple of minutes over. It says, the king of Egypt called to his nobles and said, I saw in a dream 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 skinny ones, and 7 green shafts of grain, and 7 others withered. My nobles, tell me what my vision means, if you can explain the meaning of visions. Explain for us the meaning, and then I'm skipping over, that was verse 43, I'm just going to 46. Explain for us the meaning of this new vision. 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 skinny ones, 7 green shafts, you know, so and so. And then 47, Yusuf replied, for 7 years you'll diligently grow crops like you always do. But when you harvest them, leave all the grains in the stock except the little ones you must eat. Then after this will come 7 dreadful years of bad harvest, in which you will have to live off of what you had stored up in advance, saving only small guarded supplies. These were true dreams, and he was able to interpret those for the king. It says, then after that, a year will come in which people will be delivered from the drought, and they'll press wine and oil once more. 49. Okay. Now, another important story that we do need to talk about before we end is there was a famine that struck in Egypt, okay? So Yusuf's brothers came there, okay? They came there and they came in his presence. They didn't recognize him. And so, yes, so let's see here. I'm going to see how much I tell you about this story. So I'll just read this passage from 58. It says, after he had provisioned them with what they needed, he told them, bring me the youngest brother. So the youngest brother of Yusuf is Benjamin, okay? And so Yaqub had actually told them that if you're going to go to Egypt, you've already lost one brother, Yusuf. I didn't forget that. Don't come back without all of your brothers. You know, you need to make sure you all come back together. I don't want you losing somebody. But this is what happened, okay? So Yusuf alayhi salam asked them to bring the youngest brother that you have from the same father. It says, don't you see I give full measure, I provide the best hospitality. And so they brought Benjamin. It says they answered, we'll certainly get our way from his father. Surely we'll do it, okay? So then Yusuf alayhi salam put the trade goods back in their saddlebags. And once they got back to their families, it says, when the brothers returned to their father, they said, Father, we won't get any more grain unless we take Benjamin, our youngest brother, with us next time. So send our brother Benjamin with us so we can get more supplies. And this is where Yaqub says, should I trust you with him when I already trusted you with his brother Yusuf before? Even still, Allah is the best guardian. He's the most merciful. Then when they were unpacking their supplies, they found their trade goods hidden in the grain. And they said, Father, for what more can we ask? Our trade goods have been returned to us so we can go and get more food for our families. We will protect our brother and get a full load of grain next time. And so, here they promise their father that they will come back with him. And then he advises them, my sons, do not enter the city from the same entrance, but rather each of you should pick a different entrance, okay? And not that I can help you against Allah with my advice. So he's giving them some advice. And it says, a little bit later, when the brothers arrived and they were admitted back into Yusuf's presence, Yusuf took the youngest brother, Benjamin, aside, and he wanted him to stay with him. He said, Benjamin, I'm your brother. Don't be worried about the other brothers. And after Yusuf gave all the brothers the supplies, he put his own king's drinking cup into Benjamin's saddlebag, okay? And he made like it's not an evil plan, but it's like a good plan to have Benjamin come back. So what he did is he kind of put this cup, right, into his saddlebag. And then when they left, this was announced that the king's cup was missing. It says, we're missing the great cup of the king. They replied, whoever brings it back will get a camel's load of valuables. Okay, so the guards found out that when they were searching bags, they found this cup in Benjamin's bag. So here, Benjamin was called back to Yusuf alayhi salam, and all the brothers of Yusuf had to go back to their father and tell them the sad news that they had to come back without Benjamin. Okay, and so they told their father, your son has stolen something from the king, so we had to do this. And then they told that when they were telling Yusuf that they actually were talking to Yusuf and they were talking about Yusuf at the same time. They said, we actually had another brother who used to steal before. So they still had this hatred where they were lying about Yusuf alayhi salam. And here's Yusuf, the king now. He knew these were his brothers, but he kept his feelings to himself and not give the secret away to them. Okay? And then when the brothers saw they had no so they discussed the matter privately, and it says that they went back to their father. Go back to your father and tell him, Father, your son has stole something. We report only what we know. Okay? And so, yes. So long story short, Yaqub alayhi salam still missed his son Yusuf to the degree where he was becoming ill. And so there was this, he almost was losing his eyesight. And when he found out that Benjamin was now also gone, he lost his eyesight. And so he was very affected by losing his sons. Okay, and so when the brother, so let me go ahead and read this to you. It says, when Yaqub was informed, he cried out, "Not so, you've made up a story to cover yourselves. I can do no more than endure this tragedy with dignity. Perhaps Allah will bring them all back to me somehow, for he has full knowledge and wisdom." So he still had this hope that his sons would be returned to him somehow. You know, Yusuf, who was lost before, and then Benjamin. And because of the Zoom meeting is going to finish, I need to wrap up soon. But he asked them to go back and find him. He says, "My sons, go back to Egypt. Ask about Yusuf and his brother. Never give up hope in Allah." Okay, so on and so forth. And then the brothers went back on front of Yusuf alayhi salam. And Yusuf told them, "Yes, I am Yusuf, and this is my brother Benjamin. Allah has brought the gift of this reunion to all of us." And the brothers, cried out in guilt, and they said, "Surely Allah has preferred you over us. We are guilty of a crime." So then Yusuf gave them the shirt. Yusuf alayhi salam gave them his shirt and said, "Give this to the father." And when they went back to Yaqub, what happened was Yaqub was basically blind by then, and he smelled the scent of Yusuf's shirt. And when he smelled it, he was like, "You know what? I feel like I'm smelling Yusuf." And it was like, they were just like, acting like their father went crazy. But the truth was that was Yusuf's shirt. And so it says, "I smell the scent of Yusuf, even though you may think that I'm crazy, that I'm senile." And sure enough, it was his shirt. And when he got the shirt back, and when he received this news, it's like he received his eyesight back. And so this was a fulfillment of the dream. I want to quickly jump to the Kahoot, because if they stop the Zoom meeting, we're not going to get to do the Kahoot. But that is the main series of events that happened in that story of Surah Yusuf. So I know we went a little bit over time. I want to jump over very, very quickly if you guys can get onto the Kahoot for just 12. So let's get everybody on here. I really hope that we don't run out of time. It's just a few questions. Really appreciate all of your patience today. And yes, so let's open up our Kahoot. So there's a lot of nice little stories within that longer story, and there's a lot of reflections that could come from that, but we don't have time today. Maybe we'll try to get to another time. So here is, I didn't share the screen. Share the screen. Here we go.
How much questions are
Okay, there's only like 5 questions on this one. So here we go. This is the game pin. It is 387-7945. 387-7945. Okay. Okay, we're going to start soon so that I don't lose my Zoom meeting time. We have like 2 minutes to do the whole thing. 387-7945. So please try to log on so that the Zoom meeting doesn't close on us. 387-7945. 7945. Ready?
Wait, 387-7945?
Yes, look at it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and push start.
Wait.
Okay. 387-7945. If it does cancel, I'm just going to rejoin the meeting if anything happens. Bismillah, let's start. So
Wait. Can you go
so here's the first question. The youngest brother of Yusuf was who? Who was the youngest brother of Yusuf? Was it Jacob, Benjamin, Shu'aib, or Yunus? Who was the youngest brother of Yusuf? And the answer is Benjamin. 10 of you got it right. You guys are awesome. The next one, Yusuf alayhi salam was able to do what? What was Yusuf alayhi salam able to do? Bring the dead to life, make gold from mountains, interpret dreams truly, or fish from the bottom of the ocean. Yusuf alayhi salam was able to interpret dreams truly. Excuse me. Yes, 10 of you got that right. MashaAllah. Let's go to the next one. True or false? Surah Hud is Surah 11. Surah Hud is Surah 11. We went over 2 surahs today, Hud and Yusuf. Very, very good. It is Surah 11. You guys have a good memory. A couple of more. True or false? Prophet Noah's disbelieving people drowned in a great flood. Is that true or false? Is that true? Very, very good. And the last question, hope we can catch it. Salih brought the miracle of the what? What was the sign that Salih brought? The miracle of the what? Camel, ark, golden cup, or 2 angels? Camel, ark, golden cup, or 2 angels? I know you know this, and it shouldn't have been 20 seconds, but you all know this. And yes, the answer is camel. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy we got to the end of that. You guys are awesome, mashallah. So we have some winners out of all. I'm sure many of you won. Mariam B, congratulations. You got 5 out of 5. Fatima M got 5 out of 5. And let's see who else. Aisha Sayed, congratulations. A quick dua because the Zoom meeting is going to end. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك